there are essentially three time periods in history, three time periods in Jewish history. There is the Tanakh time, the period of Tanakh, the period of the prophets, from the giving of the Torah until the beginning period of the second Beis HaMikdash, the second temple, which is the time of prophets, when the prophecies, either Chumash itself, and then later all the Nevi'im, the Shoftim, and the Nevi'im, the times of the judges and the prophets. And then prophecy comes to a close. The next time period, which starts during the second Beis HaMikdash, at the end of prophecy, and continues throughout all of the time of exile, is the time of Chazal, the time of the sages. So there's the biblical time and the time of the sages. One represents the time of redemption, or a form of Geula, a form of redemption, where Klal Yisrael as a whole, the people of Israel, were collectively, for the most part, living in one location, in the land of Eretz Yisrael. And after the Churban Bayis Rishon, already a little before that already, there was the dispersion of Klal Yisrael around the world. And then, certainly after the Churban Bayis Sheni, after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, and certainly after the Bar Kokhba revolt, there was a very small community of Jews that still lived in Eretz Yisrael, and most Jews at that point already lived outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's the time of Galus. That's the time of exile. And upon that, that's where the beginning of the rise of the Talmud Bavli, the Gemara. And the Talmud Bavli, the Gemara, which is the main body that explains the Mishnah of Chazal, the main embodiment of Torah Shebaal Peh, of the oral tradition. So this Torah Shebiksav, there's the written tradition, which is connected to the time of prophecy, which is the first time period, and then the second time period, which is Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral tradition. Upon that, Chazal say in the pasuk in Exile, which is a pasuk that's spoken about, that's written by Yirmiyah Hanavi, that's spoken about, that speaks about the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, b'machshakim ha'shivani k'meisa olam, that he placed us in the darkness, the place of darkness, like the dead of the world. Chazal, at the beginning of Sanhedrin, the Gemara says that refers to Zu Talmud Bavli. That's actually the Gemara. That the Bavli, the Gemara, Chazal, the main text of Chazal, is Bavli comes from the word bolol. Bolol means that it's mixed. It's a place of darkness. It's a place of lack of clarity, of uncertainty. Bolol means that everything is mixed together. The Gemara says the a person should divide their learning, that a person should divide their learning in thirds, a little bit of Chumash, a little bit of Mikra, a little bit of Svara, a little bit of Mishnah, and this means 3 parts of your life, or 3 parts of a single day. And Tosfos already rules that this refers to, by learning Talmud Bavli, since it's bolol, since it includes everything, you fulfill your obligations. So the Bavli is connected to this idea of the emergence of Torah, of the light of Torah, the Torah Or, that emerges from a place of Choshech. In general, Yoshe b'Choshech, the Gemara says many times that the Chazal, the sages that lived in Babel, it's considered that they're living in a dark place, in a place of Choshech. The Tanchuma, the Medrash Tanchuma says in Noach, that when it says that the people that walk in a place of darkness and then see a great light, that refers to the Gemara, that's what refers to the Talmud Bavli. So it's a light, a light that emerges from the place of Choshech. Choshech is a place, darkness is a place of exile. It's the place of a question, it's a place of uncertainty and something that's opaque and lack of, there's a type of ambiguity. and there's a suffix, there's a doubt, and then there's the emergence of light that emerges from that place of questioning, from the place of uncertainties. And that's the way the Gemara generally is explained, which means that there's a conversation, there's a back and forth, there's a shakavataya, there's a conversation, and finally there's some type of psak, some type of resolution that comes. So the light that emerges is a light that comes through Choshech, contrary to the Or, the light that's connected to the time of Tanakh, the time period, the first time period in Jewish history, the time period of the prophets. The idea of prophecy is direct revelation from top down. There is no darkness. There's something that comes up, and then there's a light that illuminates that darkness. So it's a light that illuminates darkness versus a light that emerges from darkness. There's a Yisun or mitoicha choshech, like the Zohar says. The pasuk says Yisun or min choshech. There's a greater advantage of light of darkness. That's like there's a greater advantage of wisdom than foolishness. And the Zohar reads this is mina choshech, that there's a type of light that emerges from the darkness. So there's a light which is that you walk into a room and the lights are turned on and you see exactly what's going on. This is sort of a metaphor, a mashal, that the Rambam and the Moira gives for the difference between the levels of prophecy and the opposite. One is that you walk into a room and it's a dark room, and you turn on the lights and immediately everything becomes illuminated. That's a light that reveals into the darkness. And then there's a type of light that emerges from the place of darkness, which is you walk into a room and it's dark, and you slowly become accustomed to the darkness of the room, and you bump into the table and into the chair, and then you finally recognize from that darkness, you know exactly where every single detail is in that room. You know exactly where the table is because you bumped into it a few times. You're nichshalba, and a person finally comes to the understanding only if they first fall upon it, so you bumped into it, and then it becomes a greater clarity. That's a light that emerges from a place of darkness. So one is top down and one is bottom up. One is a revelation that is an open light, a revelation, and one is a light that emerges from the place of darkness. And then there's the future, la'asalove, which is the time of the third Beis HaMikdash, and the third represents tlisoi, which is the idea of unity between the two, between like the synthesis of these two ideas, which is a synthesis between the light that emerges from above and the light that emerges from below. And that is what we're aspiring for, to enter into that higher dimension of reality, of a messianic time of Mashiach, and ultimately with the revealing of Mashiach. Let's understand this a little bit more in depth and understand exactly what this means. So if you look through a just very superficial reading, or first glance reading of Tanakh, and especially of the Nevi'im, you'll see that the Nevi'im, the prophets, when they prophesize and speak maybe sometimes harsh words and give rebuke to Klal Yisrael, they generally speak about very universal ethical issues. Charity, kindness, truth, universal truths, universal Jewish spiritual truths, and they're very global issues, and they're very obvious truths to anyone that's a thinking person and a healthy human being understands that these are things that a person should walk in the path of righteousness, and a path of empathy, and a path of humility. We don't find, a little bit with Shabbos, but we don't find generally in the prophets where they're telling Klal Yisrael, they're rooting Klal Yisrael for that they're not, how they dress, that they're not putting on their right sleeve before their left sleeve, or some other halachic issue, minutia, detailed halachic issue. This is one observation. Now we have to understand why. So there is more a general, thematic, universal idea of prophecy. Another important, we're going to mention a few distinctions to understand what this idea is. It's also important to think about this in terms of that during the times of prophecy, during the times of Moshe, then certainly during the times of the prophets, when the prophets lived in Eretz Yisrael, everything was in a particular makom, a particular space. Space, location was a very important part of the conversation. In fact, the most important idea, thing, or object, or subject in Klal Yisrael was the Beis HaMikdash. First in the Mishkan, then the Beis HaMikdash. The Makom and the Mikdash, there was something about the Makom HaMikdash. It was the place of the Beis HaMikdash. And the place of the Mizbeach, which according to the Rambam was the main object of the Beis HaMikdash. That Makom HaMizbeach, like the Rambam writes in the beginning of Hilchos Beis HaBchira, is Mechuven B'Yoser. That's other Makom Kaparas in Iver, that's a place of other Rishon Boda Carbon, that it's very much connected to place. There's the Mishnah and Kalim speaks about the Asara Kedushas. There are 10 levels of Kedusha. The highest level of Kedusha is in the Beis HaMikdash. That there's an idea of a sanctification or a recognition that the importance of space. B'chlal, generally, all of Klal Yisrael was located in one particular place, in Eretz Yisrael, which is one of the has a kedusha Eretz Yisrael, the sanctity of Eretz Yisrael, and there's particular mitzvahs that were given in Eretz Yisrael specifically in this particular place, and all of Klal Yisrael were in that place. It was a time of Torah Shebiksav. It was a time of the written Torah, contrary to the oral Torah. And the written Torah is about conceptual space. The written Torah is about the Kedusha Sa'oisius, the sanctity of the actual letters, that all the letters of the Torah, the words of the Torah, and the letters of the Torah have sacredness. That there's an object called a Sefer Torah, which is that there's a physical object called a Sefer Torah, and that is holy, versus contrary to the idea of the oral Torah, where there's the Kedusha more of the idea, even there is also Kedusha, but the Kedusha is more about the ideas, which is a conceptual thing, than the actual oisius themselves. In Halacha, this also plays out, for example, that a person makes a birchas HaTorah, makes a blessing on Torah, and reads the oisius HaTorah shebiksav, even though they don't understand what they're learning, they fulfill their obligation because they're connected to the oisius HaTorah, the letters, the actual letters of the Torah, the Kedusha, the sanctity of the letters, versus a person that learns Torah Sheba'al Peh, makes a birchas HaTorah, makes a blessing, and then learns Torah Sheba'al Peh, and has no idea what they're learning, which means they don't understand what they're saying, they're just reading the letters, they didn't fulfill their obligation. There's no idea of the Kedusha Sa'oisius. Maybe the Zohar Kodesh is a little bit different, certainly according to Sfar Shem Kabbalah, just to read the Oisius HaZohar also, because that's considered like the Torah Shebiksav, like the written Torah, in contrast to the Torah Sheba'al Peh of the other aspects of Kabbalah. But generally, it's the sanctity of space. All of Klal Yisrael was in that particular place, in that one space. And the essential space of that is the place of the Kodesh HaKodashim, which the Gemara says, Yumes ki mimenu hushas kol olam kulei. That's the place where all space emerges from. That is the essential space. When the Torah says, Vayakov vayifka ba mokim, in that place, that's the Makom HaMikdash. That is the essential space of all creation. So that is another important thing. Another interesting thing is that, in general, before we get into the way it's described in the Torah, in general, in the history of the development of the human being, in the prehistoric era, let's say, for example, in Europe, we know, just from recordings that we understand, that there was no sense of individuality. There was a sense of the collective. Individuality is kind of a more modern thing. If you look at the Torah itself, now, of course, the Torah says that every person is born mitzal malakim. There is a strong sense of individuality. But when the Torah speaks in the Torah itself, when Torah speaks, or even when the Vim speak, then as Vim, the prophets are always talking to the collective, to the klal. The prophecy is always a prophecy of a cosmic event, of a macro event, of a return to Tzion, a return to Zion, the building, returning to Eretz Yisrael, the Tchias HaMeis, the awakening of the dead bones. This is all nevuahs. These are all prophecies to the collective. There's never nevuahs to the prat. There are Nevi'im, of course there were Nevi'im that had personal prophecies, but like the Gemara says in Megillah, Nevi'ah HaSeichel l'Doros, a prophecy that was needed for the generations, for the klal, for the unfolding of the entire Jewish history was written. Nevuah that was not needed for the klal was not written. So Nevuah is generally a concept that's connected to the klal. The Torah is very little interested in the prat, in the individual, in the yachid. When the Torah does discuss a particular yachid, the yachid is always in conversation with the bigger klal. Moshe Rabbeinu, for example, is a perfect example, that he is the great leader of Klal Yisrael, and the Torah does speak about his personal life a little bit, but it's his personal life in engagement or in conversation with the klal. And same thing also certainly with all the prophets, and even then later, where it talks about Eov, which is a particular person. Again, in the Gemara Baba Basra and the Vashutim, there's a big machlekes whether Eov, when he lives, or if he even lives, or it's a mashal hoyav. The fact that we're not even sure when he lives, or if he lives, and it's just a metaphor, shows that we're not interested in Eov, in the person, in the yachid. We're interested in what Eov represents, what Job represents. The same thing when the Torah talks about schar v'oinish. When the Torah speaks about schar v'oinish, reward and punishment, the literal way of reading reward and punishment in the Torah, or the objective correlation of the subjective action, which is maybe more as a cause and effect of a person's actions. The Torah only speaks about, clearly, maybe hinted is different, but clearly the Torah speaks about a schar, a reward that is given to the collective. And the conversation is to the collective, like the Rishonim clearly speak about this, because that was needed, and it was about the immediacy in the particular place. So the Torah says that if you're going to do the mitzvahs, that you're going to have rain. If you do the mitzvahs, you're going to have rain in Eretz Yisrael, in the particular makim, and not that your particular plot of land will be irrigated through rain, but the collective, all of Klal Yisrael, will receive rain when and where in this particular location. So it's about the collective, not the yachid, not the individual. The Ibn Ezra and the Rambam, they all talk about why is the schar v'oinish speak about physical things, and one of the answers that the Rishonim give is because that's what it was needed. That was the immediacy of the people's needs. You're talking about something that's an afterlife. An afterlife journey is ready for an individual, and it's the personal, and that was not so relevant to the collective and the immediate. Another thing to think about, this is all in contrast to Torah Shabbal Peh, to the second time period, is that there was a greater, because it's about the collective and of course about the bigger story, there was a more sense and a more revealing of hashgacha, a divine providence, because it was a time of prophecy. It was a time of nisim hagaluyim, the great miracles, like the Ramban writes in the beginning of and the Parshas Bo. There was a time of these wondrous miracles, that the world was affected by these wondrous miracles. And the general idea of Nevuah, even though Nevuah is not proven through miracles, like the Rambam famously writes in the Torah, but the idea of the Nevi'im was that they did prophesize, and there was some level of miracles that were connected to them. It was a revealing of miracles. It was a time of a greater revealing of hashgacha, of divine providence. Because there was a greater revealing of hashgacha, there was less bechira. There was less free choice, or less revealing of the free choice. People, the individuals, when the Torah describes them, were archetypes. These were part of an unfolding of a greater history. So it wasn't so much about the individual having free choice in their own day-to-day life, but it was about a revealing of a collective, a bigger narrative that was unfolding. The Kabbalah and the Chesed Rebbe is right that the reason for that is because as we were closer to the revelation of Matan Torah, to revealing of Anochi Hashem Elokecha and Lo Tzach Lo Sinaf, there was a revealing of the absoluteness of the truth of reality. The closer we were to the echo of Sinai, the closer we were to that time period of the revealing at Sinai, there was less bechira. The bechira was completely lost because it was such an overwhelming. This is what the Maharal writes. The kafalim har kigigas, when it says that the mountain was suspended above their heads, what that means was it was such a type of high revelation of divine truth and the absolute truth of the oneness of Hashem, of the truth of how a person should live, that it eclipsed the possibility of having freedom. Not that Hashem forced. It was so overwhelming that there was no possibility to have any alternative. There's no choice. So there's no individual. There's no choice. It was also another point. So besides that, it was very much connected to revelation of Hashkacha, and it's connected to the klal, to the general. It's connected to the specific place. It was also a time of seeing. The encounter or the relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and us and Hashem was in a form of seeing. The prophets saw, they had a chazoin, they had a vision. There was a riyah, it was a type of seeing. They had a HaNevuah is a seeing. It was a time of prophecy. Not only were there particular prophets that's mentioned, the 48 prophets that are mentioned, but there were many more. There was millions of prophets, because Chazal say the Kaflaim Kiyetz Mitzrayim. There were double the amount of number that went out of Mitzrayim. That's 1.2 million. And the Medrash Hashirim says that for every male there was a female prophetess. So you're talking about 2.5 million prophets over a very short period of time, 1,500 years. So in that entire period, it was not a large population at that time. And then there were schools of prophets, and there were Bnei HaNevi'im, and people that were studying to become prophets. So prophecy was the overwhelming zeitgeist or reality at that time. Prophecy was to see, to have vision. That's a riyah. Now, riyah, to see, is the difference between seeing and hearing, is that when you see something, you first see the klal, you first see the general, the overarching, the theme, the principle, and then you see the details. Let's say you open your eyes and you're looking at a waterfall. You just open your eyes. You went to a place, your eyes are closed, and you open your eyes and you see this beautiful waterfall. When you see the entire waterfall. And then when you start zoning in, you start seeing the details of the thing that you're looking at. So riyah, seeing, is an observation that occurs first with the klal, the general, and it moves then to the pratim, it moves to the specific. In contrast, of course, to shmiya, hearing, is you're hearing one sound at a time, one syllable at a time, one sound at a time. Then the sound creates words, and then the words create sentences. So you're hearing first a sound that you're listening. If someone speaks very slowly, you can actually hear this. So they're pronouncing the words very slowly. They're saying Baruch Ata. So they're saying blessed are you. So you hear Ba, then you hear Ruach, and then you hear it as a sound as Baruch, to bless. Then you hear Ah, and then Ta, then you hear Ha. So then you hear Baruch Ata, then you're hearing it together. So Shmiya is that it goes from the prat to the klal, from the specific, from the detail to the collective. Where riyah is the opposite. It's first a visual of the entirety, and then you see the pratim, you see the details of that. Now riyah, in this way, there's a famous argument between many of the Rishonim, and it's machlokes between the Kabbalah and the Chakrim, which goes back already earlier into the Chakri of Yavan, is the conversation is what is the most important sense? What is the higher level of sense? Is the sense of sight or the sense of hearing? What is the most important sense? In HaNevuah, he brings on this whole arichas. He brings on all different sources of this conversation. Now, in the Zohar, in Tikkun Zohar, and also Dari in Shar K'damas Lamed Vav, Dari writes that, quoting the Tikkun Zohar and elaborating the Tikkun Zohar, that in the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud, the highest level of Yud is Chachma, is Riyah, is seeing, and Hey is Bina, which is hearing. So hearing is lower in this construct. Hearing is lower than seeing, because seeing you see the entirety. Chachma is like the Barak HaMavrik. Chachma, when a person has a wisdom or an intuition, it's like they see it, like something opens up. There's a parting, there's a eureka moment when everything becomes clear to you. Not the details. You're trying to figure something out and everything opens up and you have like a wisdom, an intuition of something. And then Bina is where you're deciphering it into language, which is pratim, which is details. You're using, one is like the right brain and one is the left brain. Now, In addition to this distinction, was a time of more the revealing of the Seides HaTorah, the revealing of the hidden aspects of the Torah. Certainly, since Matan Torah, the most experience that they experienced in Matan Torah was the revealing of Seides HaTorah, of the hidden parts of the Torah. That was in the Torah Shebiksav time period. And in the Torah Shebiksav time period, in the written time Torah period, it was first the Or, and the Or, the light, became revealed in the HaSeichel, in the place of the darkness, in the place of the details. The details is sort of the place of the darkness, because you don't yet see the entire forest, you're seeing the trees. Then when you see the entirety, that's the light. That's the question, that's the answer, that's the exile, and that's the redemption. So in this time period, during the time of Tanakh, during the Tanakhic period, the Ruach HaNevuah, the spirit of prophecy was revealed. Of course, there was also Halacha, there was also practice, there was also details, there was a way that they lived, there was a certain way that they practiced Halacha, and they practice Halacha, practice actual practical law. The practical law is more connected to the smile, connected to the left side, to the dark side, because it's detail oriented. But in the time of the Nevuah, there was a greater revealing of the Chesed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this revealing of the great light, and the details, the prat and the smile, was subsumed in the greater light. The Or was so revealed, that the light was so revealed that it illuminated even the place of the Choshech. So the focus was on the Or, the focus was on the light, and light illuminated the details. They felt, and they lived in a spiritual state. The world was a much more spiritual world. That's why people were attributed or related to the world in a much more spirit way. And that's why, of course, that was also the time, during the time of prophecy, is also the time when there was tremendous connection or inclination towards Avodah Zarah, to idol worship. Which Menashe says that one of the great kings of Israel says that if you would have been there, you would have lifted up your pants and ran towards this, which means that there was a certain strong inclination to spirit, and of course sometimes it was misdirection. They became Avodah Zarah, and then when there was the end of prophecy, then it's Batla Yitzad Avodah Zarah. Then it was also the nullification and the erosion of the Yetzer, of the inclination towards Avodah Zarah. So this was a more spiritual time, a more revealing of the light, a more revealing of the collective, a more type of experiential experiences that was able to be seen. And that's another distinction, is that then there was a more embodied experiential type of practice, experiential type of living. And then it switched in the time of Chazal, specifically in the time when we went into exile, where it became more cerebral and a more intellectual. So from experiential seeing, it moved into a different reality. In contrast to, we said before, that there's the makom, the space, the place of space, in times of Chazal, and we're still living in that time, where the focus is more on the halacha and the details. That's a time of zman. That's a time of time. Time is portable. Time is not, when the Torah speaks about, for example, that's another example of this. When Torah says, in the Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah, the Torah speaks about the creation. So it only mentions creation of space, of makom, because that's the time of makom. We said the time of Tanakh is the reality of space. So it only speaks about the creation of space. It doesn't actually say anywhere in the Torah that time itself was created. That's hinted in the word Bereshis, the Gra, the Gon, and also the Maggid of Mezrich, which incidentally they say in many Torahs very similar. They obviously live in the same time, but they actually revealed many Torahs that are very similar. There's many Torahs that said in the Maggid that you find also in the Gra. They say that the word Bereshis is the creation of Zman, is the revealing of the concept of Zman, of time. The Seder Zman, like Tzemach Tzedek writes, and the Zman itself, there's a lot, the Medrash says, but Tzemach Tzedek explains, the Seder Zman, which is Mati V'loi Mati, there's an idea of time as the rhythm of movement, and then the revealing of Zman is with the creation of space. So space and time are interlinked, and when there was the emergence, before the emergence of space, Bereshis already there was an emergence of time. But time was not revealed as a creation, because in Torah Shebiksav, in the written Torah, it's about space. When we move into the time of Chazal, which is the second period, end of second base of English period, and then forward into the times of exile, things become much more cerebral and less tangible, because we're no longer living in a particular place. There's no Sar Kedusha, there's no Makim HaMizbeach, there's no Makim HaMikdash, there's no space that we're connected to. So that we move into a world of time. Time is cerebral, time is conceptual. Time is not something that's tangible. You can touch space, you can't touch time. Even, like we said before, the creation can hint to the idea of creation of time, but not the actual time. That's the world of Zman. That's the world of time. That's why the Mishnah, which opens up the entire Torah Shebaal Peh, opens up the entire oral tradition, starts Me'emasai, from when? Famously, the question is, Me'emasai Koyim Reshus Shema, how do you know you have to read the Shema? So that's it. Okay, that says right in Torah Shebiksav. Now the question is, once we already know what it says in Torah Shebiksav, now we ask the question of when, a time question. And Chazal are going to be very interested in the world of time. Not that Torah was not, but that the focus will be in the world of time. For example, another allusion to this idea is that the whole Shisha Siddur Mishnah, the entire 6 chapters, 6 parts of the Mishnah, which is Zroyim, Moed, Nashim, Nezikim, Kachim, and Taras, the entire 6 things, is the acronym is Zman Nakat, which is time. The idea of Halacha is the idea of Jewish law of practice. And like the Mishnah always talk, the conversation in the Mishnah, the conversation in Chazal, is not so much about the klal, but the chiyuv of the yachid, the obligation of the individual who's standing in front of Hashem right now. When there was a time of the Beis HaMikdash, and we were part of a klal, the avodah that was happening, the spiritual work that was done in the name of the collective. But now in the world of halacha, which they also had halacha, but the halacha was a revealing of the higher level of chesadim that eclipsed the world of small, of Gevurah, of halacha, even though, of course, they practiced halacha and they had individual lives. But the more important part was the collective, because it was about the idea, the great unfolding. Now in the place of the bechir, in the place of free choice, it's about the individual, and the individual standing himself, herself, in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in front of the Creator, the Master of the world, wherever place they are, b'chol makom shehu, in any place, because now we're going into a place of exile. And there is no longer a concentration in a particular place. So since there's no longer a concentration of a particular place, but we're all part of this, we're all as individuals standing in front of Hashem, the conversation is to us specifically, the prat. And halacha speaks to the individual, because there is no longer the sense of klal. Of course, there is a klal. Chazal say that the Kol Yisrael became arevim zebezen. Kol Yisrael became as a collective when they entered into Eretz Yisrael, when they entered into the one specific place, into that makam. From then on, it's eternal. But that idea is that when we came, the arvus, the chiv of arvus, which means that I can make a bracha for you, even though I fulfill my obligation, but I can make it for you because your obligation is mine. That's a sense of the collective. That comes from the makam. That comes from the place that we are part of a collective. In the yachid world, I need to make the bracha for myself. In the yachid world, it's about me. Now, I also can lean onto the klal, and therefore someone else can make a bracha for me. But inside the yachid, inside the obligation of the yachid, it's me. This is why it's in the time of Chazal, it's about the individual. It's about the creativity of the individual. This is all what Chazal are revealing. The idea of what Chazal are revealing is the or that emerges from the place of Choshech. But the Choshech, the prophecy is Ruach HaKodesh Shebekirban, like the Ramban writes in Baba Basra. That Ruach HaKodesh Shebekirban means the prophecy, the revelation, the Ruach HaKodesh, the holy wisdom, the holy revelation that comes from Chazal is Bekir. It comes through them, through their own intelligence, through our own intelligence, through our own creativity, through our own connectivity to the light. We are innovating and creating. The there's a chiddush. There's a Gemara in Shavuos that says there's a chiddush that Purim is a chiddush lo nitn messianic. Of course, everything was nitn messianic, but it was a revelation that came through the creativity of the sage Kasvuni and L'Doros, Kavuni L'Doros, which is emergence of Chazal, is from the place of the exile, from the place of the lack of clarity, from the place where we don't see the hashgacha necessarily, from a place that we don't see the divine revelation. It's not like the time prep, the first time period, but it's the second time period where we don't see the hand of Hashem in a revealed way. And from there, we go into the place of darkness, and there we see the emergence of light. Therefore, because it's about the individual, and because it's about the time, because it's about the bechira, that's the time bechira, not the idea. The mode of apparatus is not seeing, which experientially you see the entirety, but it's actually through the process of hearing, shmiya. The idea of hearing becomes the most essential element here, and that's why when in the language of Chazal, when they said "Lo shamati," when Chazal say one would say, "I didn't hear that," it really means I don't think the same way, because the idea of shmiya is prat. Shmiya means the individual. How do you hear? You hear one syllable, one sound, one syllable, then one word, and then one word into one sentence, and then into an entire structure, into an entire book. But you're hearing one thing at a time. You're going from the prat to the klal. You're going from the specific to the collective. This is the idea of smoil. This is the idea of smoil etachseroshid, from the left side. This is the emergence of halacha that comes from the left side, where it's detailed, it's pratim, gevurah. Gevurah is when everything is divided. Gishmei bracha, like the idea of rain, that every single droplet of rain is different from each other. That's Gevurah comes from many. There's a multiplicity. There's the many. Chesadim, on the other hand, chesadim is when there's a revealing of an openness, of kindness, of revealing of light. One is a choshech, the one is placed from the details, from the pratim, from the individuation, from the creativity of the individual. So, in both time periods, there was the Torah HaSeichel, the hidden Torah, the secret of the Torah, or let's say the Torah of Atzilus, the Torah of oneness, of light, and there's the Torah of Bria, the Torah of duality, and the Torah where it exists within the place of duality. They both simultaneously always exist, the white fire and the black fire. But in the times of the Tanakh, what was more revealed was the white fire, and the white fire illuminated the black fire. The white fire, the Or Chesed, illuminated the black fire, the dark fire, which is the Or Gevurah, the Or of concealment, the Or of restriction of individuals, where there's a lack of revealing of Hashgacha, but there's more the emergence of the individual in the prat. That was in the first time period. In the second time period, as Zman Chazal, it's the opposite. The Iker, the main revealing, was the revealing of Halacha. And from the place of Halacha, from the dark fire, that's the place that we had access to the white fire. And this is an interesting thing that we see, another observation we can see throughout history, is that the Mukabbalim, the Kabbalists, are connected more to the white fire, connected to the Or HaNevuah more in a revealed way. The Mukabbalim and these were Mukabbalim that are also obviously great practitioners, and of course great deciders, even in Halacha, great poskim, that were more connected to the Sod, to the secret, to the hidden, to the Ruach HaNevuah, were also much more connected, even halachically, even according to law, to Eretz Yisrael. And the ones that were less connected in a revealed way to Torah HaSeichel were less connected to Eretz Yisrael. For example, a perfect example of this would be the famous machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban, whether there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's a long tshuva from the Avnei Nezer about this, whether the Rambam actually says this, but the simple reading is that the Rambam holds that there's no mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael today. When you sit there, maybe you're Makayim mitzvah, but there's no mitzvah to settle in, to go into Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban holds that there's a mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. There's a mitzvah to go settle in the land of Eretz Yisrael, and that's in fact what he did at the end of his life. Tosfos, for example, as well, in Ksuvas Kufiyud, brings up from Rabbeinu Chaim that there is no mitzvah, which is more like the opinion of the Rambam, that there's no mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. And the difference between these two, and the machlekes between these two, is that one was more connected in a revealed way. The poskim that were more connected in a revealed way to Torah Sassoid, like the Ramban, who was one of the great transmitters of Torah Sassoid, the teachings of Soid, holds that there is a mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. There's a mitzvah to settle into the land of Eretz Yisrael. Again, connected to the first paradigm of the first time period, which is the Ruach HaNevuah Tanachi, the prophecy in the time of Tanakh, versus the Rambam, who was more connected to the world of Halacha and was one of the greatest poskim that ever lived, greatest decider for Jewish law, and also, was a philosopher, was less connected, and he holds that there's not the same thing also with Tosis, that were more dialectical, interested in Halacha and the unfolding of Halacha. They were more connected to the Torah of Chutzlars, the Torah of Exile, which is more connected to the world of Halacha. Now, of course, again, saying clearly Halacha is more connected to the world of Exile, versus Torah Sassoid is connected more to redemption. That's the first paradigm versus second paradigm. But each one, of course, had both within each other. The question was, what was more revealed? Was it more revealed the Torah Sassoid, the hidden, the experiential, the seeing, the collective, and the Torah Shebiksav, the Kedushas Makom, or was it more revealed in conceptual space within dimensions of time, and time itself is the flow of time, is separation, the world of separation? Is that more revealed in the world of Halacha, in the world of Exile? The Tachlis is the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. The Tachlis is Yemaisa Mashiach. The end result is that there has to be a unity, a chibur, a unification, a perfect harmony. Not that one overwhelms the other, a perfect harmony between Chesed and Gevurah, between Kabbalah, between Soid, between the secret and Halacha, between Zman and Makom, or Makom and Zman, between space and time. Incidentally, that's why we have a deeper understanding today, even on a physical level, empirical level, of the non-absoluteness of time and space, and time and space are one continuum. This is part of the revelation of the collapse of time and space as a unity, and both to understand this. Then Zman and Makom emerges as one, and the same thing also in the world. This is revealed that that we say there is a space, a particular space, and that space holds sacredness. But from that space, see the Eretz Yisrael will still be Eretz Yisrael, of course, and the holiness and the sacredness of the land of Israel. But Asida should dispash b'chal ratzis, which means that it would become revealed without all of space, because the nekuda of all space, the inner essence of all space, is the nekuda of Kodesh HaKadoshim, is the point of the Holy of Holies. The Zohar has another image, when it does another way of saying this. The Zohar says that it's a klal, a prat, and klal. There's the general, again, the general, the klal, the principle, which we said is, which the Zohar doesn't say, but this is the way we can understand this, is that there's a time period of the klal, which is the revealing of the first time period, the first paradigm in Jewish history. There's the prat, which is revealing the halacha, the yachid, and the zman, and about the individual standing in relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the zman of the prat. And then there's the klal shekal b'chol pratim. And then there's a higher level of klal, principle, that has all the details, that they too become. This is another way of saying this. There's exclusive transcendence and there's inclusive transcendence. And the unity, the highest level of unity, the highest level of the oneness, of the non-duality, is such radical non-duality that includes also duality. That's the revealing of the ultimate Kedusha. That's the ultimate revealing of the Tachlis Shmayim V'Aretz in time and within space. That the highest level of unity is so radical non-duality that it also includes the place of duality, that it's inclusive transcendence. And these are the three time periods. Just to back this up and to read into a Zohar very quickly. Zohar in Parshas Ba'al Oischa. The Zohar says like this in the beginning of Ba'al Oischa. That the tree of life, which is the Torah, the Zohar says, beginning of Ba'al Oischa, Kuf Mem Ches Amud Beis. This is the sun. The Torah is a revelation of the tree of life, is like the sun that revealed to everything. And this light of the sun reveals and illuminates everything, and it permeates the entire body. And it permeates. There's two sides to it. There's Chatzaf and Chadarim. There's south, and there's north. There's north and there's south. There's the left and there's the right. Chad Yaminu, Chad Shmalo, and there's the right and the right and the left side. B'shaita the Shimshon Nor, when the light of the sun was illuminated, it revealed the light of the right side, and the right side became tremendously empowered and illuminated. And from the right side, the left side was also illuminated. And it became included within the right side of light. And then the Zohar continues. When the sun is setting towards Ma'ariv, towards the west, when the sun is going down, Kiv the Ma'ariv Iskarav, when it's setting, which the idea of the sunrise is like the revelation. The sun and the moon represents also the difference between Teresh B'Ksav and Teresh B'Peh. One has its own light. One is the revealing of the light, the sun is shining and everything's revealed, and one is the darkness, the place of night, the place of exile. So when the sun is setting, Sater Tzofin Itar L'Kabel B'Kadmisa, the left side. So when the sun is rising, when the sun is shining, the right side becomes illuminated, and from the right side, also the left side becomes illuminated. But when the sun is setting, which represents the time of exile, Kiva Shemesh, because the sun set, which represents the place of obscurity and lack of clarity and ambiguity and personal questioning and challenges, and the place of uncertainty, when that is happening, when the sun is setting, Sater Tzofin Itar L'Kabel Kadmisa, V'Karav L'Mayra, V'Zavig L'Basrei, S'mayel Tachas Reishi, then the left side first comes and welcomes the sun and connects to the sun. And then the right side. So when the sun is in its full glory, it's first the right side, and the right side illuminates the left side. But when the sun is setting, it's the left side, and then the right side comes. And that is actually the difference between these two paradigms in Jewish history. The first paradigm in the history, the first time period in the history, is when the sun is rising, which is the time of revelation, the time of a form of Gula, the time of redemption, when Klal Yisrael was living in Eretz Yisrael, when there's a Ruach HaNevuah, when there's prophecy, when it was an age of prophecy, not just there were prophets, but there were schools of prophets, and everyone was in the state of spiritual awareness. Granted, there's also a lot of Avodah Zarah, clearly, a lot of idol worship, but that's part and parcel of the same reality, because people are having heightened experiences, expansive experiences, transcendental experiences, that because there was a revealing of this tremendous light, which also the light sometimes went into places of darkness, and people sought the light in places of darkness. But when there was that revealing of light, there was also the left side, which is also, there was the practice, there was the shmiya, there was the yachid, there was the individual, there was the hearing, there was the halacha, there was the details of how you tie your shoes and what hand do you put, how do you put on your shirt. Of course there were all those halachas, but that was subsumed within the light of the right side, and the right side then became illuminated, that also lit up the left side. So you felt the soid, you felt the secret, you felt the hidden also within the practice of the left. Then there came another time period when the sun was setting. Then was the emergence of revealing of more the halacha, the practice of Masai. When exactly do we do this? And we're speaking to the yachid, we're speaking to the individual. There's no longer so much hashgacha, revealing of divine providence, but there's more the revealing of bechira. So therefore it's a revealing of the halacha. It's the more revealing of the left side. But ultimately, we have to get to a point where there's a collapse between these two things, and both things become completely in sync with each other, that there is no distinction between a person practicing spirituality and a person practicing halacha, between a person practicing Kabbalah, doing Kabbalah, being involved in the world of Kabbalah, in the world of Soid, and the world of practical reality of how you tie your shoes. They both become one and the same of the revealing of something that's greater. That's the highest level. That's the highest yichud. That's the ultimate shleimus, the ultimate level. Where that's why it says that dafka in this time period, specifically in this time period, there's a higher level of revealing of bechira, much stronger individuality, agency, person creating their free choice, and the Heisenberg and the theory of uncertainty allows for even the possibility in this locked-in universe for the possibility of free choice, and yet simultaneously is the bigger revealing of Achdus Hashem. The highest level of revealing of Achdus Hashem is constantly revealing higher and higher levels of Achdus Hashem, of Hashgacha Pratis, of divine providence, not only Hashgacha Klolis, general divine providence, but Hashgacha Pratis on every single leaf, like the Baal Shem Tov teaches, that every single leaf that turns over is a revealing of Hashgacha Pratis. That specific Hashgacha Pratis simultaneously revealed with the highest level of Bechir, because that's the ultimate paradox that holds this tension of these two realities together, of the klal, of the principle and the prat, of the seeing and the hearing, of the future and the present, of Zman and Makim, all held as one reality, because revealing of Atzmos, of the highest level of revelation, which is the ultimate inclusion of all details into the oneness of Hashem.